Okay, let's talk about operations with fractions. Alright, so when you're dealing with fractions, obviously there's several things you can do. Add and subtract fractions. You can multiply and divide fractions. Alright, adding and subtracting fractions, this should be definitely a review for all these subjects right here on fractions. When you're adding and subtracting fractions, the main thing you need to remember is to find a common denominator. Alright, common denominator. And of course the denominator I'm going to cut that short, denominator. Of course that's the bottom of a fraction. It has to be common. Alright, so let's just say you have 1/2 plus 1/3. You can't really do that because you don't have common denominators here, so you have to find common denominators. Now, a common mistake is the students don't rewrite the entire question with the new common denominator. Alright, so we need to find multiples of 2 and multiples of 3 to make common denominators. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8, we got 3, 6, 9, 12. As you see, 6 would be the lowest common denominator. So we can use 6 and 6. Now what you do to the numerator, you have to do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So we have to multiply this by 3 to get to 6. I have to multiply this by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. In order to get from 3 to 6, we have to multiply by 2. So you got to multiply this by 2. 1 times 2 is 2, of course 2. Now here's how I tell students to remember this. You work that hard to find a common denominator, make sure you keep it. Alright, so then it's 6, add across the top, it's 5. Alright, so that's how you add fractions. Okay, now let's do something with subtracting fractions. Maybe 4/5 minus 1/3. Okay, of course that minus sign's kind of hanging out there. Let's put it down here. Alright, so once again I cannot do this because I do not have a common denominator. I don't have one. Alright, so I got to rewrite the entire problem so that I do have a common denominator. So if I want to list out the factors of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Listing out the factors of 5 is 5, 10, 15, 20. And of course we see the common denominator right there. Now, a lot of students just multiply this number times this number to find the common denominator, which you definitely can do, but it's not always going to be the lowest common denominator. All that's going to cause is extra reducing. Alright, so 15 and 15, you have to multiply this by 3, so that you have to multiply this by 3. Multiply this by 5, so you have to multiply this by 5. Okay, so that's going to make 12. 1 times 5 is 5. Keep the common denominator. 12 minus 5 is 7, and that is a reduced fraction. Okay? Now let's deal with multiplying and dividing a little bit. Multiplying is way easy. This is the simplest one. I don't care what your fraction is. 7/8 times 1/2. It's extremely simple. You just multiply straight across. 7 times 1 is 7. 8 times 2 is 16. Boom, you're done. 3/4 times 2/3. Multiply straight across. 6/12. Now we do have to reduce that because 6 and 12 can be reduced. Now a common thing that students do is always reduce by 2 when the numbers are even. You can reduce this actually by 6. Okay, so 6 will go into 6 one time. 6 will go into 12 2 times. Alright, now let's move on to dividing. Alright, so when you divide fractions, it's almost like the same thing as multiplying with the exception of one step. Okay. Right here, you can't technically divide by a fraction, and the reason is because a fraction is part of a whole, so it's very difficult to figure out what part of a whole is. Alright, because that's all you're doing when you divide, right? You're trying to figure out how many times something will go into something. Alright, well, long story short, even if that confused you, So what you have to do is take the reciprocal. And the whole purpose of this is, in algebra, you know, we do the opposite of one thing, we got to do it to the next. So if we want to switch this from division to multiplication, we can, but then we also have to flip our fraction. Alright, it's called the reciprocal. Alright, so now we can multiply straight across. 14 and 8 can reduce that. Okay, reduce by 2. Alright, so that would be 7 over 4. And I know this is an improper fraction, but that's okay for now. Alright, let's try a different one. 6 over 11 divided by 9 over 13. Okay? So we're going to keep our first fraction, change that to multiplication, and then take the reciprocal. After that, you're going to multiply straight across. 6 times 13. Or if you want to do that off to the side. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so you got 78 over 99. Alright, now I know this will reduce because 3 goes into this and 3 goes into this. How do you know 3 goes in? Good question. A little extra information. Make sure that you've been watching your video. Alright, so if you add the digits of a number, 78, 7 plus 8, you get 15. 15 is divisible by 3, therefore I know that 78 is divisible by 3. Okay. So this goes in 26 times. This goes in, well, there's 1, 1. So that goes in 3 times 33. Alright. Boom. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I know some of that math popped off the side of the video, but you should be able to get it at this point.